Chameleons Are Cool, written by Martin Jenkins, illustrated by Sue Shields. Chameleons are lizards, and lizards are reptiles like snakes, crocodiles, and tortoises. There are about 4,000 kinds of lizards altogether, including around 120 different chameleons. Just over half of all the types of chameleons come from Madagascar, a big island off the east coast of Africa. Most of the others live in mainland Africa. Chameleons Are Cool, written by Martin Jenkins, illustrated by Sue Shields. Some lizards eat bananas. Chameleons don't. Some lizards walk upside down on the ceiling. Chameleons can't. There's even a lizard that glides from tree to tree. A chameleon certainly wouldn't do that. But of all the different kinds of lizards, I still think chameleons are the best. Chameleons are cool. It's not that they're all that big. The biggest is only about the size of a small cat. It's called Austerlitz chameleon, and it lives in Madagascar. They can be really, really small, though. The smallest one could balance happily on your little finger. It's called the dwarf Borghesia, and it lives in Madagascar, too. And I suppose you wouldn't exactly call many of them beautiful. Their skin is wrinkly and bumpy, and they've got big, bulgy eyes, while lots of them have the most ridiculous noses. I think it's their noses I like best. Their mouths are pretty odd, too. They turn down at the corners, which is why chameleons always look so grumpy. Actually, they don't just look grumpy, they are grumpy. So if two chameleons bump into each other, things can get pretty lively. There's lots of puffing and hissing, and sometimes there's a real fight. And that's when chameleons do what they're most famous for. They change color. Lots of people think chameleons change color to match their surroundings. They don't. They change color when they're angry, or when they're cold or too hot, or when they're sick. And there are some sorts of chameleons that hardly change color at all, which means they can't really change color. As a rule, though, chameleons don't bump into one another all that often. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to call them lazy, but they certainly don't move any more than they have to. And when they do, it's almost always incredibly slow. Sometimes they stop completely in mid-step as if they've forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. But if you look closely, you'll see that they're actually carefully peering about, which means looking. Now, peering about is something chameleons are rather good at. That's because their eyes can move separately from each other, unlike our eyes, which always move together. So while one eye is looking back over the chameleon's shoulder, the other one is scanning the branches ahead. As soon as it spots something tasty, the chameleon fixes both eyes on its prey and begins to creep forward, even more slowly than usual. Then it opens its mouth just a crack, and thwap! Out shoots this amazingly long tongue with a sticky tip at the end, like a piece of well-chewed chewing gum. Then the tongue flies back, and there's a lot of chomping and chewing, and perhaps a few bits of insect legs flutter to the ground. And after the chameleon just sits there for an hour or two, doing nothing very much at all, looking quite exhausted and still grumpy after all that hard work. And there you have it. How could you possibly resist a pocket-sized, bad-tempered, color-changing, swivel-eyed, snail-paced, long-tongued sharpshooter? If chameleons aren't cool, then I don't know what is.